Come sit down for the forum, please. We have a... Go ahead. Dr. Yieh is a professor at Virginia State, but I got to know him because his daughter was our organ scholar here for
Yes.
a while, more than 10 years ago. How many
That's
years
right.
ago?
Yes. Yeah, we'll be.
20 plus years ago, and so he has come and he has done a forum for us before, and just a gift to the church. So let me turn it over to Dr. Yieh.
Thank you, Mark, and everybody. Thank you for staying behind. Continue your wonderful donuts. They taste very fresh. Huh? It's good. And maybe some coffee. I was told that we have only 40 minutes. If I don't get off at 45, I will be kicked out of here all the way to the harbor. So it's a daunting task, and I try and think about how can I do it in 40 minutes and do some justice. And so I still prepare a lot of slides. So some of the slides, I hope you don't mind if I kind of just switch over so that we can finish in 40 minutes. I understand the logistics, and the little children are involved. We need to get off. So just to say I thank you, and I take note, and I will try to keep that in time. Okay. Thank you. All right. How do we make moral choices as Christians in a church, in a community of faith? That's the kind of theme. And I just realized that among us, we have a distinguished professor of ethics who knows everything about moral decisions and ethics, procedures, and deliberations and discernment. By my approach, I'm a New Testament professor, so my approach is to use New Testament, especially this one little house church of Philemon's household, and Paul as a pastor to them, and they have one particular case. So this is a case study. If you are here looking for moral decisions, moral choices of the grand theories from Aristotle's on, you come to her. Here we are, you know. All right? So that's the main thrust. Now, St. Paul, our apostles, is called the apostle to the Gentiles because he spread the gospel beyond the boundary of Jewish groups, right? And then became, in some historians, even called him the founder of Christianity. Think about it. Is Jesus the founder of Christianity? No, Jesus was the subject of worship, but the one who make it on. So that's the argument. But at any rate, we know from Paul that he has 7 undisputed letters left for us in the New Testament. There are other letters in the New Testament that was written in his name, but probably not by himself. Now, we know Paul has 3 very prominent roles in history of the church. He's the missionary, right? If you read the Acts of Apostles, one by some scholarly account, he may have built about 20 built up about 21 churches. He doesn't write to everyone. Not every church was such a big trouble or troublemakers for him. And he had traveled more than 10,000 miles. Now, we're not talking about flying by Virginia Atlantic to London. We're talking about walking most of the time. And according to what we have on record only. So he's a missionary. And then he's a theologian. Just think of Romans and Galatians, right? Laid out the gospel of grace of God and the justification by faith and all that. And then he's a pastor. Reading most of the other letters, 1 Thessalonians, do not, be oversaddened by the loss of life. And then 1 and 2 Corinthians, a lot of ethical issues or divisions, spiritual gifts that confronts the church. Philippians, where he shared ministry with them, and Philemon. We see Paul as a pastor in his writing, trying to take care of conflict issues, leadership issues, trying to to encourage them to build one another, build up one another. So these three, think about it. Most of the books, scholarly studies on Paul would be on theologian. And some evangelical church love Acts of Apostles to know about his mission gear, his calling, and his strategies. But few look at Paul as a pastor. And so this is one of the areas I think we have a lot of new things to learn. Now, Paul tried to be a pastor by writing letters because that's the only thing that have left for us to study, to learn. And we have to know that letter writing was a major educational purpose for most of the people. Many of them can only afford 4 years of primary schooling. The majority then become illiterate. Only a few, the rich, the powerful, could afford hiring tutors to teach their kids. But letters is so important, doing business transactions, writing contracts, communicating when they travel to different parts of the empire. And so it was a basic skill and the only and the best communication tools. And so we have to understand the letter writing. Interesting enough is that Paul's letter was written to a church. And guess how they understand it? They were usually the messengers would bring Paul's letter and they would be invited to speak and to read his letter to the whole congregation. So in other words, they don't have the luxury of New Testament scholars today to sit down, read the manuscript, compare the different manuscripts, check in different commentaries. They listen and they get what the main ideas. So today I would like to start with that. It's a hearing or audible culture of the time, and it's very interesting. That's why image is important. You can go into detailed arguments, quoting a lot of footnotes if you're doing a doctor thesis, dissertation, right? But for communication, for Paul's letters, it is usually by listening. And so how does that impact the way we understand what he tried to say? Another thing is that personal relations become important, especially for Paul's letters to be taken note of and to be listened to be read aloud. And then even a letter is a very small part of what Paul wants to say. How long can you write, right? And there are so many nuances. You don't see the expressions of people's response. And there are so many contexts that needs to be explained. You don't have that luxuries to know. And so Paul has to be a very careful, smart writer to communicate even with emotions. So the idea of logos, pathos, and ethos of the ancient Greek rhetoric writings that is involved with the contents and the forms and the person involved, right? So listen to it. So now, just a quick, Paul and Timothy and others writing probably from Rome because he was in prison, and to Philemon, but then he said Raymond and Apphia and Archippus and everybody in his church, probably in Colossae, all right? Now, Paul's letter, context and context, so we should ask the question, who is the center? Is that Paul or other named friends? Now, who is the recipient? Philemon is the one directed, but also other names are written there. What is the subject matter? It seems to be rather clear. If you're familiar with Philemon, or if you get up last night, try to prepare for this lecture by reading it, you find there's only one issue. There's a runaway slave, Onesimus, that Paul wants to send him back and ask Philemon to take him back. That's the only matter. So now, then the question also is, how does Paul persuade Philemon to answer his call? So those are the questions we want to look into. But again, the location, Colossae, is where most probably Philemon and his churches were located, Colossae, and Ephesus is right here. Ephesus is one of the 4 major cities of the Roman Empire. Rome in the west, Ephesus right in the middle, east would be Antioch, and south would be Alexandria, Egypt. And so very major big cities, and then other big cities like Laodicea, Hierapolis, and Colossae is one. Now Colossae, unlike other cities, have not really been excavated. So this is the amount that some university, some professor who got enough money and free laborers, they can do it. So we don't know in particular church, but we do know the Asia Minor province of Rome, the whole area, but not this particular city, and some artifacts from about the slaves. Slave was not a good kind of life or job to be in, and very often it's not by choice. And do you know where they get the slave from? Mostly prisoner of wars. That's why Romans have so many military campaigns. They go out to loot the city, take the treasures, the gold, and then take the people. And that's why on their triumphant march, there will be the slaves, will be the prisoner of war displayed, and then they will be given or sold to the state market. Slave is a very important population and important resources for Roman Empire to sustain. Do you know that in whole Italy in the first century, in all Italy, 1/10 of the population were slaves. They were the ones who were doing the digging out the gold and everything, the miners, and they're the ones who do the farming, the one who take care of animals, the one who cook, who were the one burn up the water for the public bath, and they do every labor work. They do every work. So they need those human powers to do it. Even the doctors were very often taken from the Greeks people and have them study medicine, and they serve as private doctors. And so 1/10 of the population in Italy were slaves. They speak different languages taken from different places. And so they are, and then in Rome, one quarter of the whole population was slaves. That's how that city can be built so magnificently, all the aqueducts and all the hard work and the level of luxury of life and so on and so forth. So slaves was a necessity from a Roman Empire's point of view. But imagine, you don't want to be that 1/4 or 1/10 of the people. And they had abundance of law to regulate how the transaction about the slave, the property, the owner, and the penalties and all those things. So those are important background to understand Philemon and the case we are going to study. All right, so now, today we want to listen to Paul's letters and then do a little bit role play. I know time is short, but I think it will be a good experience for us. So I would need some helper, okay? Since you're a professor and you're going to be our students at VDS, you probably would not say no to me. I would take advantage of that. Could you be the messenger who read this letter, okay? But then this is Paul writing. Can we have the two of you serving as Paul? There are two Pauls. Can we have two Onesimus? How about the first two, you and you? The two, you will be Onesimus, and the others will be members of his church. Is that okay? So let's listen. And then I'm going to ask them a few questions before I summarize with some very good bullet points and beautiful photos of my slides. Maybe that's a good way to get the gist of the whole thing in 40 minutes. Would you be happy to cooperate with me? Okay, so now then, please pretend you're not watching, but we are going to have, in our DMIN, doctoral ministry programs, we often have case studies, and we actually develop spatial methodologies. Case study is one major key, because every church, every student bring in real case. Okay, my vestry are not very happy with me now. What happened? They welcomed me just 3 years ago. And I think I'm doing fine. But some of them may hate me. What do I do? And of course, they write their real cases confidentially. They come to the class, and they are trying to learn how to do verbatim very carefully. and then they will be left outside when their case was being discussed by the rest of the class. Usually we have 4 or 5 students with 2 professors in that case studies, and you write up your application, so now you're going to be the third-party observer. You don't have any more chance to explain, try to justify yourself, and then we'll be discussing it, and so you got a object way to see. See, that's one way to train our D-Min students to think, because otherwise, if we are involved, it's hard to take a good side, isn't it? And it's hard to hear different ways. But anyway, we're using similar ideas, so it's called fishbowl model. Now, so here's the letter. You try to listen to the messengers from Paul, but not reading it. I'm keeping it just in case it's easier. We don't have to flip the Bible, but then maybe we can come back if we need to quote, right? Please. Yes, could you stand up? We officially welcome you to our midst, and everybody, our dear sister has come from Paul, and she brings us important message from our beloved pastor and apostles. And so here you are. Please share with us.
I have a letter from Paul. I, Paul, prisoner of Christ Jesus, and Timothy, our brother, to Philemon, our dear friend and co-worker, to Apphia, our sister, to Archippus, our fellow soldier, and to the church in your house. Grace to you and peace from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. Shall I keep
Yes. Thankfully, it's only about 20 verses.
When I remember you in my prayers, I always thank my God because I hear of your love for all the saints and your faith toward the Lord Jesus. I pray that the sharing of your faith in koinonia, taste, pistuosu, may become effective when you perceive all the good that we may do for Christ. I have indeed received much joy and encouragement from your love because the hearts of the saints have been refreshed through you, my brother.
Continue.
The matter
For this reason,
For this reason, though I am bold enough in Christ to command you to do your duty, yet I would rather appeal to you on the basis of love. And I, Paul, do this as an old man, and now also as a prisoner of Christ Jesus.
try not to read, try to hear.
I am appealing you for my child, Onesimus, whose father I have become during my imprisonment. Formerly he was useless to you, but now he is indeed useful both to you and to me. I am sending him, that is, my own heart, back to you. I wanted to keep him with me so that he might be of service to me in your place during my imprisonment for the gospel, but I preferred to do nothing without your consent, in order that your good deed might be voluntary and not something forced. Perhaps this is the reason he was separated from you for a while, so that you might have him back forever, no longer as a slave, but more than a slave, a beloved brother, especially to me, but how much more to you, both in the flesh and in the Lord. So, if you consider me your partner, welcome him as you would welcome me. If he has wronged you in any way or owes you anything, charge that to my account. I, Paul, am writing this with my own hand. I will repay it. I say nothing about your owing me, even your own self. Yes, brother, let me have this benefit from you in the Lord. Refresh my heart in Christ. Confident of your obedience, I am writing to you knowing that you will do even more than I say. And one more thing, prepare a guest room for me, for I am hoping through your prayers to be restored to you. Epaphras, my fellow prisoner in Jesus Christ, sends greeting to you, and so do Mark, Aristarchus, Demas, and Luke, my fellow workers. The grace of Lord Jesus Christ be with your spirit.
Thank you, sister. Now, we gather in Philemon's house for worship, and then we miss Apostle Paul, who started our church, but he has gone on for more journey, and he's now as he called himself a prisoner, right? In prison and most probably in Rome. So it was wonderful to be here from him. Okay? So now my question for our Philemon. You are the Philemon, right? Philemon, what did you hear in this letter? What do you think Paul wants?
He wants us to welcome Onesimus.
Basically, right? Not only welcome him back. Okay.
I said, welcome Onesimus back, and I said not just back, but as like a brother, as an equal. That's what I heard.
Yes, can you all hear it? All right. So you got the main point. I forgot to assign Paul. Can we have random Pauls here, the two of you? Do you think they got what you want them to do?
Yes.
Okay, more or less.
To prepare
Yeah. And then 5 stars. That's what's rare at the end, I want to say. Okay. Anything else? Forgiveness of debts. Ooh. Where did you get that idea? Yeah, did you hear that? Welcome him back, including not only upgrading his status, but also what? Forgiving his debts. Now,
And we also heard the Paul
yeah.
repay any debts, not just forgive his debts.
Yeah. Oh,
And certainly we will prepare.
okay, so let's start with these wonderful questions, right? Sometimes we forget that. That's number 2 or 3. You know, a nice room for fellowship again. Also, this forgiving the debts. If you're worried, don't worry, I will pay for him, isn't it? But did Paul say anything more on that point? In order to persuade you to forgive his debt, he said, if he owes you anything, I will pay him back. And charge, okay, all those business languages, debt, payment, account. In fact, you owe me. What did he mean by saying you owed him? Do you remember that little details? You owe me your eternal life. I'm the one who brings you to Christ. Hey, grace comes from God, not from the apostles. That's why you usually pay your priest's salary. No, joking aside. Yeah. But what was the purpose of Paul? You see, actually we know from other evidences that Paul never take any money from this church. He only takes money from the church of Philippi in all his life. He never takes salary. He worked his own hands as a tent maker. He's a bivocational, if you to this language. All right, so what does he mean by you owe me? He's reminding you that now we Christians look at a lot of our decisions, not just business dealing. All right, even if you want to think business-wise, you're a businessman, you own slaves, right? You have a household to run, your business to run. You have to care for the transactions. But you owe me spiritually. And I know you are indebted to me, and you are thankful for that. So when Paul says that, he is transforming that business metaphor into a spiritual side of the two. And the purpose is to help you make the right decision, isn't it? Make you be more willing. Now, let's think about, why do you think Paul would assume he may have owed him something? And that needs to be taken care of. Paul was in prison. Onesimus. No, he was not captured. He was in prison to care for Paul. He ran away from Colossus all the way to Rome. It's a big city, more job, and more less. You can disappear in the crowd, right? But he found Paul, and then he was, I know this Paul. He came to my masters in Colossus and so on. You think about it. If this is where the background knowledge comes to help, isn't it? We know the Roman Empire has a lot of slaves, a lot of legislature about slavery. So slaves have no status, legal status, and cannot own any property. It's not that they got salary, they can put it aside, put in a retirement fund, that will grow. No, everything they don't get paid anything. How can he run away? Do you think Onesimus needs some money? Onesimus, do you need some money if you plan to run away? Otherwise, in 3 days, you just die from starvation, right? If not being caught. So what would you have to do? What would you have to do or have done in order to run all the way to Rome and spend some time? You must have stolen something. From where? From Philemon. You see, we just read the letter, sometimes we did not match the two, the reality, and that's why Paul, actually, so when you think of Paul as the pastor of this church, trying to take up this case from a gospel and love point of view, and yet he knows how unfair it might feel for Philemon, right? This is a runaway, it's his property that get away with it. He lost something. And then he must have stolen something. And again, Paul, you want me to just forgive him and welcome him back. And not only just welcome him back, forgive his debts, and then make him a brother. Right? Do you think that's an easy thing to ask for? It's not that easy, yeah? Especially if you are. Now, let me think about the rest of the church for a moment. When you hear this, you realize this letter was addressing one thing and one thing only. That is to ask the Philemon family to bring back and forgive and love him and so on and so forth. Do you think you would want him to do it or not? Mind you, some of you also have slaves. Oh, right. Right? Would you be kind of really saying, okay, for the love of God, bring him back, of course, go ahead. But I have 5 slaves, I have 3, I have 10. What if this president, so what if any one of my slaves run away and come just because of a letter that Paul wrote and get everything free, scot-free, and so on and so forth? Do you think it will be difficult? All right. So now, let me ask everybody, when you heard this letter, what is the contents, the subject matter? Is that a personal letter? Or is it a public letter? And sometimes scholarship put it as epistles. Sounds more official, or letter, personal letter, or for the church. Now, think about what you have heard in the letter. Do you think Paul wrote this letter as a private letter to Philemon? Or does he want all of you to hear what he asked? And all of you to stare at Philemon to see how he might decide what to do? Again, is that letter private or public? Okay, let's hear from the congregation. You think it's public. Why? Okay. And how do you know it's a public? Do you notice how Paul says, I, Paul, write to you, but also Timothy and many others. And I greet you, and Apphia and others, and many others. So that the letter has to be read and not just handed over to Philemon. Has to be read because you want to bring the apostolic greetings to everyone. So it's a private business matter, but it becomes a public issue. So do you think Paul was he a little bit manipulating? He's trying to make this not just your personal decision, but make it an occasion for everybody in the church, in this new community of faith and love, to understand a social issue, a life and death issues, how as a Christian now, you have to have a different value, different way, different considerations when you make a decision. And every decision you make is affecting not only you, but everybody else. Because now, if it is a public, I guess you agree it's a public one, even though the business is really for Philemon only, right? But I think Paul is taking the opportunity to invite not only Philemon to make a tough and difficult decisions, because he has to be willing to forfeit his legal right with economic consequences and future potential problems down the road. But at the same time, he's reminded, Onesimus is my heart, my love, and he cares for me, and I love you, and you have been known for love, and I pray and give thanks for you, for your love, 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 love. Is there any other way you can do but listening to my request, right? But he wants to go on to say, yes, first from the love. Two, he does owe anything, and this system, you do something, but remember how you find compensation from God, because you owe me your spiritual life, your life with God, and that would then be an added considerations. I don't know, for ethics professors, or medical ethics, business ethics, do you consider love of God, love of humanity? No, unless they give you a big tax break, unless they give you big publicity, right? And so you see, Paul is actually teaching a broader ethical principles because of the gospel, because of the love of God. And he also knows that every single decision we have made, we need to make, will be reflect of who we are, what we are, and how we relate to each other. So even a runaway slave is now your brothers and sisters in the Lord. So he lifted up our value system, our whole ethical system at a different level. And that's why I think he's using this. So in other words, it is a little bit gentle pressure, right? When the letter was read and everybody listened to him, and then what would you think, congregation, when you see your beloved host of your house church decided to say yes? What goes through your mind? Remember, you had 10 slaves at home too, and they're not always working hard. Some of them are trying to get away if they can. What would be the impact on you when you're listening to this letter from Paul?
So, what I thought was interesting was, before going into the appeal, Paul says, well, I could just command you to do it.
That's right.
But the appeal to
As your spiritual fathers, kind of, right?
So, part of me, I think as a congregation, feel that I want to do it because
Yeah.
I feel like I'm commanded to, so I need a rationale.
Okay.
And appeal is the rationale.
Okay. Wonderful. It's a good way to put it, isn't it? A very accurate description of what would go through people's mind, right? Indeed, yes. And it's very rhetorically powerful when Paul says, I can just commend you, and I know you love me, so I know you would listen. But I'm still writing these letters. That means he wants Philemon to think through the whole thing and then voluntarily doing it. Not just because he owes Paul, not just because Paul can commend him. And also when Paul says, I can commend him, but I'm pleading with you emotionally, spiritually, as well as business-wise. See, if you forgive him, and you come back, not being punished, not being restored, not being tortured, not being put in prison, think what? He's going to work much harder than before and much more willingly for you. So you are gaining back a better slave and indeed a brothers who will be giving all his life for you. And so all this kind of appeal, these rhetorical devices is helping us to think about our normal way and about God's way of doing things, isn't it? All right? So, see, very good. I think now it's time to ask about Onesimus. Onesimus will be going with them. Why would you go with them back there? Would you, when Paul says, fine, you have run away, you've been free, and thank you for caring for me, but I think it's best for you to go back to your master and reconcile with him. Otherwise, you'll be on the run all your life without an ID, without a legal documents. Who knows what will happen to you, right? And when you're caught, will be no return. Why, I can plead your case. Why don't you go back? What do you think Paul is helping Onesimus to do? Get him back to a life that is safe, that would be good, and that would be, reconciliation also, as now a Christians also, right? But think of the risk. Do you think you'll be willing to go back just because Paul wrote that little letter? Because you are turning yourself in, so to speak, right? Would you be worried a little bit? Very worried, not just a little bit. But you go. Why would you go, do you think? You miss them. Could be that. Right. Even if you don't have full confidence in Paul's letter. That's all reasonable, isn't it? Very reasonable. But you take the risk. Why would you be even willing to take the risk? Because it's a very dangerous decision to go back. Once you go back, you're at the mercy of the law, of Philemon, of the church, right? But you're waiting because it's something about your old master, Philemon. You have seen him, a businessman, but now become a Christian and even become a host to a church. You know his life has been changed. You know he's a different person now. And you know what Paul has done, has said, and Paul has gone out of his way to help you. So there might be something there also to tilt at this. Very worried, but okay, I'm going to trust it, rather than just here and then for the rest of life without any security, right? Sense of security, so you go home. Now, when you hear the letter, whether when Paul was writing it or when you hear it being read, what comes into your mind emotionally or otherwise?
Well, I think you're very thankful that Paul has taken up your case.
That's right. Nobody speaks up for slaves. Yeah. Well, they'll be thinking that you're so special, you're just so lucky. Maybe envious too. Yeah. So do you see a short letter of 22 verses? If we read Paul's letters in as a real historical case, it helps us to think a lot more. Do you think you begin to see a little more depth about what this letter is trying to say? And we begin to appreciate the difficulty of a new Christian trying to do it the right way, as God's love commands, and then they have to be willing to give up their legal issues and maybe interests in some way. But something is there to push them, to help them, to be willing to do that. Then now we begin to see that's where Paul as a good pastor comes to mind. That's why sometimes I teach this class for my seminarians. I want them to go out and think of Paul not just as a great theologian who talked about justification by faith, all those big deal. Hey, Martin Luther has dealt with, John Calvin has dealt with. You just read them. But not many scholars have actually helped you to read those letters as real people, real life, one case at a time, and where we see Paul's vision for the church, where we see Paul's ideas what Christian life should be, and that's where we see how community should be as a new community of faith. And that's where we can all learn to grow, and that's where a seminarian can become a better pastor when they go out. So now, thank you very much. We can go on a few more questions for you. Let me ask quickly, before I have 5 minutes to go through some of the wonderful, beautiful summary I have done. But let's see. Do you think, let's hear from the one sitting in the very back here, do you think Philemon took Paul's advice and do what he wanted? In other words, was this letter a success? Why? Hmm? You think he would? Right? You're so confident that he's so good as a writer, as a pastor, as an apostle, and the Philemon are just so nice and will be listening. That's assumption. Any proof or evidence? Simple enough. What do you think? If this paper, if it didn't convince Philemon to say Onesimus, would it be preserved and be circulated during Paul's time, after Paul's time? It would not, right? Wouldn't that be a reasonable inference? He must have successfully persuaded. And they also love it so much that they preserve it for the church to read. Number two, historically, we later on learned that there was a bishop of Ephesus by the name of Onesimus, just about 20, 30 years later. Would that be the Onesimus of this one? If that was, wouldn't that be wonderful? You see, Philemon, you're not only setting a slave free, you welcome him back as brothers, he becomes the bishop of the church. See, you get extra bonus in the book of life in heaven. And so here we are. A short letter, but a lot of questions to think, to learn, and we can then think about how we as Christians, as a community, you see, the matter of fact that Paul wants it to become a public issue is to invite whole churches to think about it, so everybody learn from it. And that's how a good church should function. Not just for a gossiping thing, not just a question for gossip, but a question for deep reflections and mutual support. You see, if even Philemon accept him back, see, did you hear that Onesimus was still worried how his co-workers might react, right? And how other slaves might be trying to run away and so on and so forth. And so there's a lot that requires us as a community that often is an important help for us too, right? And I think somebody must have noticed that preparing room, that's another very gentle, see, I'm going to check on how you're doing, right? So you feel very embarrassed. You don't listen to him when he comes along, right? And do you think Paul was a wise pastor? Was he a wise pastor? Yeah. At times, right? Judging by this letter on this issue, do you think he handled it well? I'm sure he prayed a lot. He was also worried, right? You never know. What if Onesimus get turned down? Then one brother is in peril. His credibility as their apostle is also at risk. So there must be enough of understanding to write a letter that. So now can you imagine how important it is for the pastor to think deeply, to know everybody and to know the relationship, and to be able to write and communicate in such a way to help changing mind, changing standard, welcoming and embracing new values, even that it means at the expense of some of their interests. It's not an easy one. Okay, what did Paul want? We already talked about that. Let's go to how did he do it? Three things. One, emotional appeal, right? He calls himself a prisoner of Christ, just like a martyr. You love me because I bring you to conversion to Christ, and now I'm suffering for the gospel. So you would have extra respect for me. That's a very emotional point. Jerome, the Roman Catholic theologian, I must stand in awe of the apostles' greatness of soul here, as a man whose mind burns for Christ. He is held in prison, is constrained by chains, in physical misery, separated from dear ones, plunged into prison darkness, yet he does not fear the injury. He is not crucified with sadness. Rather, he knows nothing else than to ponder the gospel of Christ, and in writing this letter on behalf of Onesimus. Now, Paul also used the language of family a lot. My child, my brother, your brother. So we are the family of God. And then he's in of love, love, love. I love you, you love them. You're well known for love. All those powerful languages, very emotional appeal. He also used rational appeal about the business accounting, isn't it? Now, so if you owe, I repay, you owe me, but we can cancel that, credit for forgiveness. And this is what John Chrysostom said about this particular issue. Paul writes at once, moving in with subtle spiritual grace. The idea is that since Paul did not refuse to extend his credit, how ironic it would be if Philemon should refuse to receive Onesimus. The mention of this deserved favor would both shame Philemon into compliance and bring Onesimus out of trouble. A little bit of shaming or a little bit of gentle pressure is sometimes important. This is what you do with your children, isn't that right? You can also lay out the commandment or the law penalties. You have to give them some candies, chocolates, promise to take them to the harbor to see the aquarium, and so on and so forth. Rational, communal. Make these issues a public issues. Invite the community involvement. Yes, if you don't like Paul, you might think of he's manipulated. At the same time, he also taken high risk. You can say he's wise. He knows his sheep in that church. He knows how to encourage everybody. And that's why he brings everybody into the concert. So emotional, rational, and communal appeal. That's how a good pastor should be. That's why you can see I pick up these three issues for my students. Now, finally, a few things. There's an issue about slaves and the gospel of liberty. Interestingly, now we can continue to ask. I may have only 1 minute. Paul might, people might ask, Paul fight for the freedom of one slave. How about our slave system, especially in American history? So some of my African-American students and colleagues continue to struggle with this issue. But it's wonderful that I've heard some of them recognizing that, yes, social history has, slavery, for instance, it has a social history. It's a human things, many generations, self-interest, and so on and so forth. But this letter gives us a new light, how the love of God should change one person at a time, and in time, hopefully, the system will be changed. And it never changed, at least until the civil rights movement of this country, when you think about it. The whole human history, slavery in Europe, in America, since Paul's time. But the civil rights movement did have that impact, and that's because of the Christian virtue that Paul has laid out in this letter. So here we are. Another one, and this is what Paul, Martin says, another one is, now church is God's household. So whether you are the owner, you are the slave, whether you are rich, whether you're poor, whether you're a man or a woman, we all in Christ, we're all one, and that's Paul's central vision of the church should be. And we can see that being played out in his argument, and John Calvin says something about that a long time. And finally, we are in the church together, and our ministry is transformative love. Love that changes our value, changes our way of doing things, changes our willingness to give up. The volunteerism of this country for a long time was also inspired very much by this kind of Christian ethics and values, right? And so here we are. How do we make decisions? Finally, Paul teaches ethical decision on the basis of love as sharing of faith that is informed and voluntary. See, he wants to inform Philemon so that he's willing to do that, not just because, oh, Paul, I owe him. All right. He wants you to think through, right? It's an informed decision, and it's based on love, and it's based on the sharing of faith, and also he expects communal support to help each one of us to do those kind of tough things and making those tough decisions, so we can all become a real community of love that testify to the gospel of God. Here we are, 40 minutes. Sorry, no time for Q&A, but I hope it's helpful to you some way. Reading and studying Bible can be fun, isn't it? If we have this kind of opportunity, different kind of question to ask. So I hope it's helpful to you, and thank you, everybody. And thank you for our Oscar Award actors and actresses and readers.